What's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of Games Up podcast. My name's Cameron, and this week I am joined by just me, unfortunately. It was a little bit too difficult for myself and Lewis and Lawrence to gather around this week because of various commitments and things, so we thought we'd do a bit of a stripped back episode. It's not entirely a full episode, but it's still an episode, and we'll be back to regular full scheduling next week. For this week, however, we're going to go over some of the news stories for the past 7 days that you might have missed. So that's kind of our topic and news all rolled into one, is some of the coolest news stories that you might have missed. So let's get straight to it. The first piece of news is about Overwatch, of course, because like one of every three things we talk about is Overwatch, but it's a pretty cool story about a community coming together. So somebody posted on Reddit about them being barely able to play Overwatch because of their PC, but they, despite struggling to play the game, had got a play of the game with one of the characters. You can see it in the various news stories that reported on it. It looks frankly awful. The play of the game is fantastic, but the quality of the GIF is really, really slow. It looks almost 16-bit. The reason this is a news story, however, is because of how the community rallied around them. People started to get together and gave him spare parts from their PCs, to the point that he's now put together a new PC from those spare parts that can run Overwatch far, far better. We thought it was a nice news story to start us all off. It's a great way of showing how communities under games can have a real positive thing about them, can do something really positive. So that's the first news story for this week that you might have missed. The second one comes from Respawn, EA's studio, and it's talking about the future of Titanfall and where they plan to go after Titanfall 2. To summarise, the news story is mostly focused on ongoing DLC for Titanfall 2 going forward, and showing that there will be support for the next few months at least. But there's some interesting tidbits here about where Titanfall might be going in the future. So, I'll quote directly from the source. Here we go. Outside of the studio, we are exploring new ideas that expand the Titanfall universe with partners like Nexon, who is currently working on other Titanfall projects, including a free-to-play version of Titanfall for Korea. We've also teamed up to develop awesome mobile titles set in the world of Titanfall. They've got some exciting stuff in the works that we'll be talking about in the near future. They then go on to talk about the Star Wars project that they've been working on, and we recently saw them doing some hiring for projects as well. The interesting thing here is there's no particular mention of Titanfall getting any kind of sequel, or Titanfall being an ongoing franchise. The news story does mention that the team, in fact I'll quote again directly from the source, "We are incredibly passionate about Titanfall and have lofty aspirations for what we want to achieve, not only with the game, but also with you, the community." What's interesting here is that Titanfall, it's not really being set in stone that Titanfall's going to continue. It's certainly being set in stone that the universe is going to continue and that support will continue. But this is certainly no announcement of a Titanfall 3, and it certainly doesn't suggest that Titanfall 3 is something we should be expecting anytime soon. The thing that's kind of worrying about that is we know that Titanfall 2 didn't quite sell as EA had hoped it did. We know that it underperformed from sales expectations, and this is partly due to lofty sales expectations and partly due to some other things as well. Is this perhaps a way for Titanfall and Respawn to shift the focus from Titanfall on consoles to what Titanfall in a wider context can be, to perhaps change our expectations from Titanfall 3 to Titanfall Mobile or Titanfall Free-to-Play, depending on how those business models sell? That's entirely conjecture at this point. It could be absolutely none of those things, or it could be exactly all of them. It remains to be seen. But if it is what we think it is, and if it is that which we conjectured, then it's a very, very interesting point in the timeline of the Titanfall franchise, and certainly a turning point for that part of the genre, whether the genre follows suit, which it likely won't. Next up, we have a couple of Nintendo stories. So Nintendo is to double the production of the Switch due to the popularity of the console since its launch. Now, there's been a number of news stories come out and talk about the popularity of the Switch. We know that Zelda became one of Nintendo's most successful launch franchises and exclusives generally to date. We also know that the system has been selling fantastically well, so Nintendo is to double production of the Switch to match this reception. It's a fantastic piece of news for a console that seemed a little bit shaky coming out of the gate and has still had a little few issues crop up here and there, but it's a really positive step forward, especially from Nintendo, who are known for their blue ocean selling techniques. It's nice to see them try to match that kind of reception and match that kind of demand. Hopefully it won't be too long until you get your hands on a Switch yourself if you're looking for one. The next story about the Switch is that they have added 5 new games this week to the eShop, so let's have a look at what they are. So, first up, we have Human Resource Machine. The next game was Little Inferno, and the next game was World of Goo. Then the next game is The King of Fighters 94, and finally the one that most people will likely have an interest in, The Binding of Isaac Afterbirth, which we know was delayed, which was originally supposed to be on the console at launch. Well, it's now on the console. It suffered from a small delay, but it is now available on the eShop. This is really good. It's really good to be seeing Nintendo getting these third-party games, and it's really good to be seeing this many games jump onto the console just weeks after its launch. Hopefully, it sets a precedent for Nintendo going forward and for the Switch's lifespan as we see it continue. The final piece of news this week, and we think it's one that we can kind of talk about for a little bit as a topic, but not overly so because there's just me here, is the winners for the 2017 South by Southwest Gaming Awards were announced. They include a whole range of games, and we're going to go through them category by category. So let's do just that. We'll start with Mobile Game of the Year, which, no surprise here, frankly, goes to Pokemon Go by Niantic. Pokemon Go is an absolutely just fantastic, genuinely groundbreaking game, and Niantic get a little bit of criticism, perhaps a little more than they deserve at the minute, for the community and the way that they've handled certain things, but the ground that company broke when they released it is second to none, and it's no surprise that they took Mobile Game of the Year. It's very, very well deserved. Esports Game of the Year, interestingly, went to Overwatch. The category is defined as the online game with the best competitive scene, growth and entertainment value, and in that sense alone, Overwatch absolutely deserves it. The amount of growth and the amount of development that we've seen in Overwatch over the past few months is undeniable. It's become quite a trend very, very quickly. Speaking of it becoming quite a trend, it also picked up Trending Game of the Year. The Matthew Crump Cultural Innovation Award went to That Dragon Cancer by Numinous Games. The category is defined as awarded to the game that best challenges the norm of everyday gaming and offers a culturally innovative view of a game world, character, or gameplay. Of course, That Dragon Cancer is an incredibly, incredibly personal story developed by a parent who lost their child to cancer and created the game to take people through the experience of what it was like to experience this young person going through such a horrific thing. It's a very, very intense game from what I've heard. I'll be honest, I haven't taken the opportunity to play it yet. But obviously it's very, very clearly a worthy winner for being such a brave thing to put in a medium like video games. There are a few interesting omissions, though, I would say, from the Matthew Crump Cultural Innovation Award. Personally, I think there are a couple of things that really deserved a shout here, and the one that stands out to me the most is the lack of the witness. Whilst it might not challenge the norm in typical gameplay, in typical gaming and gameplay conventions, it certainly is an absolute change in what we're used to in games, and it certainly is a game that makes you step back and consider just how it makes you look at video games and how it makes you look at the world and how it makes you look at your interactions with them. It's not necessarily brave in a narrative standpoint, it's not necessarily brave in a social or cultural standpoint, but it certainly is brave in a mechanic standpoint and in a development standpoint, and I think that deserves recognition, though I can entirely see why the games here have been selected, and I can absolutely see why That Dragon Cancer would win. The Excellence in Narrative Award went to Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. Interestingly, it was up against That Dragon Cancer, Oxenfree, The Last Guardian, and Firewatch. It's fascinating to see just how many Sony exclusives are here. Firewatch, of course, launched as a Sony exclusive, The Last Guardian is a Sony exclusive, and Uncharted 4 a Sony exclusive. Perhaps a statement that Sony are particularly good at capturing narrative excellence within their exclusive games, or a statement that 2016 was a strong year for Sony exclusives. Potentially both true. Either way, Uncharted walked away with the award. Excellence in design went to Dishonored 2 by Arcane and Bethesda. I myself have just made a couple of major jumps through Dishonored, and frankly, I can really see why this has been given the award. Again, I think there's potentially arguments that The Witness could have won, arguments that Overwatch could have won, but Dishonored is absolutely it's a stunning example of beautiful level design and beautiful game development, and Arcane absolutely deserve the award, so congratulations to them. Excellence in gameplay went to Doom, another one by Bethesda, this time developed by id. Interestingly, it was up against Dishonored 2 as well as Dark Souls 3, Firewatch, and I Expect You to Die. The most fulfilling community-funded game went to Starbound. It was up against that Dragon Cancer again, Super Hot, Hyper Light Drifter, and Darkest Dungeon. The most promising new intellectual property award went to Overwatch. The most memorable character award went to Uncharted 4 for Nathan Drake. Excellence in multiplayer went to Overwatch, and excellence in convergence went to Batman Arkham VR by Warner Brothers, which is really cool. It's really cool to see a VR game, which has barely been out for a few months at this point, being given awards. I've played Arkham VR, and it is truly stunning. I'm not the biggest VR fan yet. I'm still yet to be entirely convinced in that sense. I think it's a great medium with some really great promise for the future, but I've yet to have that sort of perfect experience. But Batman Arkham VR was the closest I've come to it, and I would recommend everyone give it a go if you absolutely can. There's a few others here to go through, but we'll go through them a little more quickly. Excellence in animation went to Uncharted 4. Excellence in visual achievement went to Uncharted 4. Excellence in technical achievement went to Battlefield 1. Excellence in musical score went to Doom, and excellence in SFX went to Battlefield 1. And then the overall game of the year, up for the award this year were Titanfall 2, Overwatch, Doom, Dishonored 2, and Uncharted 4, and of those games, Uncharted 4 took it. Frankly, I think any of the 5 games here could be a very good shoo-in for the award. I'd argue that Titanfall 2 might be stepping up into a league that it doesn't quite belong in yet, but certainly there's a good argument to be made for it, and I think any of these would have been worthy winners, and I think Uncharted 4 is clearly a worthy winner in itself. So those were the South by Southwest Gaming Awards, and some of my thoughts on them on behalf of Games Up, as I'm the only one representing us this week, unfortunately. But we will be back next week, and we will hope to see you then. If you'd like to see us then, please consider subscribing to the channel, because that way you won't miss it when we put it out. And if you like what you heard here, please consider dropping us a like. It lets us know that what we're doing is good. It lets us know that you like it, which helps us to keep doing it. So, if you feel so inclined, click on those things. Click on the Facebook thing below. Hope you've enjoyed this slightly shorter, slightly more stripped back episode than usual, and we'll see you next week. But until then, the game's up.